Now, you guys will remember yesterday on the show, we had to talk about the unfortunate, sad news that Hollywood icon Bruce Willis was needing to step away from acting, de facto retiring from acting. And while, I have been critical of Bruce Willis's efforts the last 10, 15 years of acting, just kind of phoning it in, the reality is he is a first ballot Hall of Famer actor. The guy's incredible, and we reviewed and went down his career. Even if you take the Die Hard movies out, still a Hall of Fame career. That's how good of a career he's had and how much he has contributed to us as film fans over the years. Well, we're hearing some stuff right now that's coming out in an article in Variety that honestly I'm finding a little bit disturbing. And what's coming out right now in this article in Variety is basically the idea is this, is that people have known for at least 2 years that Bruce was being affected by this condition that he has, that affects his memory, his ability to understand things, and his ability to communicate things, which is, look, that's as bad as having a busted foot if you're a sprinter. That's your bread and butter right there if you're an actor, right? But it's now come out that it was recognizable that he was struggling with this stuff for at least 2 years, but the people managing him were still putting him in movies, were still putting him out there on sets, and it literally got dangerous a couple of times. Now, I'm going to read a little bit of this article from Variety, and it said this: several of Bruce Willis's recent directors spoke to the Los Angeles Times about the concerns they felt while working with the actor in the years leading up to Wednesday's announcement that Willis had aphasia and is stepping away from his acting career. Aphasia is a language disorder caused by brain damage that affects a person's ability to communicate. The directors witnessed the effects of Willis's losing his mental acuity, which often resulted in the actor being unable to remember his dialogue. Mike Burns, who directed Bruce Willis in Out of Death, said that he was asked to reduce the actor's speaking parts in the film. It looks like we need to knock down Bruce's page count by about 5 pages, Burns wrote in a June 2020 email obtained by the Times to his film screenwriter. We also need to abbreviate his dialogue a bit so that there are no monologues, etc. After let me start that again. After the first day of working with Bruce, I could see it firsthand and I realized that there was a bigger issue at stake and why I had been asked to shorten his lines, Burns said, noting that he was ultimately tasked with shooting all of Willis's dialogue scenes, about 25 pages worth in the script, in a single day. You got to understand, a lot of movies will shoot like 2 pages a day. So they wanted to shoot 25 pages of script in a single day. When Burns was asked to direct a follow-up Willis movie, Wrong Place, he was told the actor would be able to perform better. Burns said, I didn't think he was better. I thought he was worse. After we finished, I said, I'm done. I'm not going to do any other Bruce Willis movies. I'm relieved that he is taking time off. Jesse V. Johnson, who directed Willis in White Elephant, after first working with the actor decades ago as a stuntman, they shot their film in Georgia last April, but Johnson said, it was clear that he was not the Bruce I remembered. The filmmaker turned down a request to shoot more Willis movies after White Elephant. I gotta say, in reading that, this is very disturbing to me on 2 different levels. Also, there's a story that gets relayed where Bruce Willis, because he forgot what was supposed to happen in the script, he had a loaded gun with a blank in it. And there was supposed to be a verbal cue in the line of dialogue that he was supposed to say that his co-star heard the verbal cue, knew to duck, and then Bruce Willis was supposed to fire the blank. Bruce forgot the line, fired off the gun with the blank at the actor who never heard the line to duck and didn't duck, and nothing happened, thankfully, but it was a dangerous situation. There's 2 things here. Number one, the people managing Bruce Willis's career and handling Bruce Willis knew at least 2 years ago, probably 3. And I don't want to make big assumptions, but I think it's safe to say if they were having this type of problems 2 years ago, probably 3 years ago, they were able to recognize that Bruce was struggling, that Bruce was having problems. And I think for his management and his handlers to continue to shovel him out there to do as many movies as possible before his time runs out. And I think that's become clear now. When you saw the sheer number of movies he did, the Razzies actually made a category just for Bruce Willis. What do you do, like 8 movies in 1 year or something like that?
Something like that.
The fact that his managers and handlers were still shoving him out there to do that when he was clearly struggling, I'm not going to say I condemn that. I'm just saying I find that disturbing. So that's the one thing. The other thing that I find disturbing in all this is that when you are a film producer and you're making movies and you're putting up a lot of money for a small budget film, a good chunk of your budget is going into having Bruce Willis in your movie. And his management were, I'll say it, ripping off filmmakers, knowing that they were giving the filmmakers a currently, what's the best word to use, like when a quarterback isn't at 100%? But a compromised.
Deficient? Compromised? Yeah.
Compromised, I think.
His management knew full well that they were taking full price, but giving them a compromised Bruce Willis, who was simply, whatever his efforts were going to be, was not going to be in a position where he could deliver the best Bruce Willis. So I find it disturbing that they were still trying to take advantage of Bruce Willis by putting him in as many movies as possible. And then I also find it disturbing that his business people were profiting from films knowing that those filmmakers were not really getting what they paid for. And I don't want to use any other word other than I feel disturbed by this. This feels yucky to me on several levels. And especially now finding out that his condition's at the stage that it's in. Anyway, Rob, you hear this story. You've been on a lot of sets, like whether it's a physical impairment or, I mean, a lot of stories went around about Robert Downey Jr. at one point in his career was showing up compromised because of drug or alcohol abuse or whatever. But have you firsthand seen performers or directors, whatever, show up compromised? And what do you think about the story we're hearing coming out of Variety?
Well, first of all, this thing about Bruce Willis, it really, like you, I find it disturbing because how was it for him? You know, think about him on those sets knowing he couldn't remember his lines. And I'm sure he kept it together, but how frustrating must it have been knowing that he's impaired and knowing that he couldn't deliver the performances? I understand he probably, to be fair, I'll bet the mandate was work as much as I can. I need to have money for my family and for myself, as much money as I can make before I can't work anymore. I can understand that impulse from his perspective and his management's perspective. But on the other hand, like you pointed out, you know, you're giving these filmmakers, and they're not big budget movies, and a lot of that budget is going to his fee, whatever that fee was. It was substantial, I'm sure. And that's just bad business all the way around. And it's also, I think, kind of cruel, to be honest. Cruel to Bruce himself and putting him in this position. I haven't been on many sets, I can't remember any, where I've seen actors compromised. I've been lucky in the sense that I've worked on some, and I behind the scenes, I had a camera running the whole time. So I would know, if they were compromised because I could go anywhere with the camera. And I never saw that. I mean, one of the things, John, when you're working on big budget, and it's not always the case, but when you're working on these large budget movies, the actors have to be ready to go. And if they're not ready to go, it ain't cool at all, because you have a crew and time is money. Every second on a movie set costs money, John. And it's not a great thing. And on an independent movie, it's 10 times as bad because you're always fighting time.
And money becomes a more precious commodity. See, now I don't blame Bruce Willis at all for this.
I don't either.
Look at it, because if you listen to any like football players, right? If you ask a football player who's injured, hey, do you need to sit on the bench? Are you ready to go? A warrior is always going to say, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
That's why, like in boxing too, like Ray, you know this, in boxing too, like when they go to a fighter in the corner who might be getting the crap kicked out of him and say, are you still able to go? A warrior is going to say, I'm ready to go. It's up to the people in their corner to say, hey, I get it. You're a warrior. You want to go. But it's up to the people in the corner to look after their fighter, to look after their player and say, you're not ready to go. And that's why if Bruce Willis is a warrior, man, you're going to go and say, hey, can you go? Bruce Willis is going to say, yeah, I can go.
Absolutely.
I can go. Because that's what Bruce Willis does. He delivers, right? I'm ready to go. That's why I don't put this on Bruce Willis. I put this on the people surrounding Bruce Willis, because it's their job to protect him and to protect the people that they're taking their money from.
Well, the gun story is really disturbing because, you know, that's how Brandon Lee died on the set of The Crow.
Right.
And when you have those kinds of safety issues and people are, you're putting Bruce in harm's way and the rest of the crew and the other actors. And that's unconscionable. It should never happen.
Chris, you're hearing this story about, you know, a guy who is, without question, first ballot Hall of Famer, all-time great. What are the things of this story that you're reading in Variety that stand out to you the most, and what are your first impressions?
Well, I mean, the gun thing is disturbing because that's also how we lost that DP Hutchins as well. And firearms on set, regardless if there's blanks or not, you know, it has to be treated with the utmost care. So that is something that is very upsetting and shocking to hear about. We touched on this a little bit yesterday, how you can get this, right? How you can have aphasia. And usually it comes from a head injury, some kind of head trauma, a stroke, neurological disorders like Alzheimer's. So there's a whole bunch of different things that could come in to play here. Tumors can affect it as well. So a lot of people probably weren't privy to this information, right? Medical business is your own business. It's between you and your medical professional. So I do want to give some people the benefit of the doubt here that maybe a few people weren't aware of what was actually occurring. If anyone has had somebody have Alzheimer's in their family, you know how hard that can be of, no, they're fine, they're just forgetful. No, they're fine, they're just having an off day. And it takes a while for all of us to kind of get on the same page with, hey, actually, we really need to talk about what's happening with Uncle Charlie, right? In this case, too, I love that you all brought up the comparison to sports players because actors and performers have this absolutely in spades. We've got stage health. We brag about it. Comedians brag about stage health all the time. Sick as a dog, puking in a corner, going through this, but I got on stage and I was fine for my 15 minutes.
Yep.
And actors definitely do that because there
Show must go on.
Exactly. And there is, even when you're Bruce Willis, I think, there is still kind of this I'm replaceable mentality. You know, acting is a white collar job with a blue collar attitude of, hey, I've studied this. I am very well trained. I have put in my 10,000 hours, but I could be replaced with somebody else at any moment. So I think there is that fear for him and his team.
You couldn't be replaced.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate that. But that is something lurking in the back of our heads, right? In addition to all the imposter syndrome and all this other stuff, I could be replaced by another actor who's at my same caliber. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure him and his team have a lot of these other things that they're juggling here. I mean, there's a lot of, I don't want to use the phrase in a gauche way, but there is a lot of mental gymnastics when it comes to how do you navigate something like this? And I don't know what the right or wrong thing is to do in a situation like this, aside from disclose when you can and be upfront when it comes to other people's safety as well.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, again, to me, it is the Warriors' job to answer the bell. Mm-hmm. It is the people around them's job to tell them when they can't. And Bruce answered the bell, and his people around him should have told him that he can't. And they certainly shouldn't have taken the money of independent filmmakers who were getting a compromised Bruce Willis at that point. So I don't know. Ray, you've seen a lot of fights too. Like I've heard you watch a fight saying, why are they letting this guy go out there? But I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
You would hope that, I don't know how long he's had this team, but through those years that they would actually have a personal care for whoever they're looking after. Same thing with boxing. Sometimes, like, people say, hey, you need just a coach without any feelings to win. But sometimes though, if the coach cares about them, they save their life. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a thin line on what decisions need to be made for a particular person or situation. This one, I think the people should have shown more care towards Bruce himself and for anyone that it would affect around him that he's working with. I mean, it could be a domino effect from what happens with Bruce to everyone around him. It's just a sad situation. I just wish he was in better care and maybe someone was looking at the situation from the outside and gave their opinion. I don't know.
Well, look, whatever those situations is, we are still talking about a Hall of Famer guy and whose career in the coming days and weeks we will celebrate with great enthusiasm. Anyway, guys, question is for you. You hear about this story. What are the first things that jump to you? Whatever your thoughts are, jump down into the comment section below and leave your thoughts there.